The first time I saw a human, I couldn't understand what was happening to my body. My scales flushed a brilliant shade of azure, my secondary heart began racing, and my epidermis secreted an embarrassing amount of protective moisture. It was problematic to say the least, especially considering I was the crown princess of the Zaltharian Empire, and we were in the middle of first contact negotiations. Let me back up. I'm Princess Zira of House Kalaran, heir to the crystalline throne of Zaldar, commander of the Imperial Vanguard Fleet, and apparently hopelessly attracted to a species we had only just discovered. My race has conquered 17 star systems. We're known throughout the galaxy as fearless warriors, brilliant tacticians, and merciless when crossed. What we're not known for is losing our composure at diplomatic functions. The humans had arrived in our space 3 cycles ago. Their technology was laughably primitive, barely achieved faster-than-light travel, rudimentary shielding, and weapons that wouldn't scratch the paint on our scout ships. By all normal protocols, we should have simply annexed their territory and been done with it. But something about their transmissions intrigued my father, the Emperor. They spoke of concepts like democracy and individual rights, quaint notions we had outgrown millennia ago. So instead of conquest, we invited their representatives to our homeworld. I still remember the moment their shuttle docked in our grand orbital station. I stood beside my father, draped in ceremonial battle armor that highlighted my clan markings, my posture perfect as befitting royalty. The shuttle doors opened with a hiss, and that's when I saw him. The human male was tall for his species, though still a head shorter than me. His skin lacked scales entirely, just smooth, vulnerable-looking flesh in a warm tan color. His eyes were strangely round, a deep brown that reminded me of the sacred pools on our southern continent. But what struck me most was his mouth. When he smiled at my father, something electric shot through my nervous system. I had never seen anything so fascinatingly alien. "Greetings, Your Imperial Majesty," the human said in our language, his pronunciation surprisingly adequate. "I am Captain Alexander Chin of Earth, representing the United Nations of Humanity. We come in peace and friendship." My father gave the traditional response, but I barely heard it. My primary focus was on maintaining my dignity while my body betrayed me. The moisture secretions had soaked through my ceremonial undergarments, and I could feel rivulets of it threatening to drip down my leg plates. This was unprecedented. Zaltharians only produce such secretions in 2 circumstances: when we need to survive extreme heat, or during mating season. It was definitely not mating season. As the delegation moved through the formal introductions, I managed to compose myself enough to perform my duties. I extended my forearm in the traditional warrior's greeting to Captain Chin, careful to keep my claws retracted. "Princess Zira," he said, taking my forearm in his strange 5-fingered hand. "Your reputation precedes you. Your tactical brilliance at the Battle of Corvash Pass is studied even in our military academies." I was startled. "You know of our history? We've been intercepting your transmissions for decades," he admitted with another one of those devastating smiles. "We wanted to understand who we were dealing with before making contact." "Clever," I replied, finding my royal voice at last. "Though somewhat devious for a species claiming peaceful intentions." "Caution isn't devious, Your Highness. It's just good sense when meeting a warrior empire." His boldness was refreshing. "Most species cower before us. This human spoke as if we were equals." The diplomatic reception continued, with various officials exchanging pleasantries and preliminary discussions about trade, borders, and non-aggression pacts. I should have been analyzing their weaknesses, assessing their potential value as vassals, or at minimum, participating in the conversation. Instead, I found myself studying the human captain's movements. The way his strange, flexible lips formed words. The casual confidence with which he carried himself despite being surrounded by predators who could tear him apart. After the formal reception, my father assigned me to be the delegation's guide and liaison, a clear punishment for my distracted behavior. Or perhaps he had noticed my reaction and found it amusing. The Emperor's sense of humor has always been inscrutable. As I led the humans to their quarters, Captain Chin fell into step beside me. Despite my longer stride, he kept pace easily. "Your station is magnificent," he said, gazing up at the crystalline arches that supported the main corridor. "We have nothing like this." "It's over 8,000 years old," I replied, grateful for the neutral topic. "Built during the Third Dynasty's expansion." 8,000? He stopped walking for a moment. "Our entire civilization isn't that old." I allowed myself a small smile of pride. "Perhaps that explains your unconventional approach to galactic politics." Or perhaps youth has its advantages, he countered. We're not bound by 8,000 years of tradition. The impertinence. And yet, I found I didn't want to bite his head off, literally or figuratively. Instead, I felt a strange desire to continue this verbal sparring. We reached the diplomatic quarters and I explained the environmental controls, which had been adjusted to human preferences. As the other delegates entered their assigned rooms, Captain Chin lingered at his doorway. "Princess," he said, his voice lowered, "I couldn't help noticing your reaction during the reception. I hope I didn't cause offense." My scales flushed again, the betraying moisture beginning to form. "No offense was taken, Captain. Our species has different physiological responses. Nothing to concern yourself with." He studied me with those strange brown eyes, and for a terrifying moment, I wondered if humans could smell pheromones. Did he know what was happening to me? "If you say so, Your Highness." He gave a small bow. "I look forward to our next meeting." As I walked away, I heard him add quietly, almost to himself, "Very much." I froze mid-step, then forced myself to continue walking as if I hadn't heard. But I had. And now I had a diplomatic crisis on my hands, one entirely of my own making. Because the crown princess of the mighty Zaltharian Empire, conqueror of star systems and commander of fleets, was inexplicably, impossibly attracted to a primitive alien from a backwater planet. And worse still, I suspected he knew it. Sleep evaded me that night cycle. I paced my royal chambers, my tail lashing in agitation, leaving faint scratch marks on the polished obsidian floors. What was wrong with me? I had encountered thousands of species in my 200 cycles of life. Some were objectively beautiful even by Zaltharian standards. The crystalline Novari with their shimmering bodies, the graceful four-armed Peltians whose dances were renowned throughout the galaxy. None had ever affected me this way. Perhaps it was a biological incompatibility. Some kind of allergic reaction? An unforeseen chemical response to human pheromones? I needed answers before I embarrassed myself, and my empire, any further. I pressed my palm against the communication panel. "Connect me to Chief Scientist Corval. Priority Alpha." Moments later, the aging scientist's face appeared on the screen, his scales dull with age but his eyes still sharp. "Princess? It's the middle of the sleep cycle. I'm aware of the time, Corval. I need information on human biology. Immediately." His head frills raised in surprise. "The new species? We've barely begun preliminary studies." "Whatever you have. Send it to my private terminal." He hesitated, then nodded. "As you command, Your Highness." Within minutes, my screen filled with preliminary data. The humans were even more bizarre than I had realized. Warm-blooded but with no scales or protective exoskeleton. External auditory organs. A completely inefficient reproductive system that required regular mating even outside designated breeding seasons. They were fascinating. I read until my eyes burned, absorbing everything. Their social structures, their odd insistence on romantic love, as separate from practical breeding arrangements, their bizarre custom of kissing, pressing their mouths together as some kind of pair-bonding ritual. Primitively mesmerizing. Dawn found me still at my terminal. I had official duties to attend to, a military inspection, a trade negotiation with the Vex Confederacy, but I reassigned them to my underlings. Today, I would be personally escorting the human delegation on a tour of the capital city. When I arrived at their quarters, Captain Chin was waiting in the corridor alone. He wore a different uniform today, less formal, a deep blue that contrasted with his skin tone in a way that made my primary heart stutter. "Your companions?" I asked, noting their absence. "Still adapting to your day cycle," he explained. "Dr. Rivera is particularly struggling with the longer days here. I hope it's not an inconvenience if it's just me for the tour." An inconvenience? It was a disaster. Hours alone with him, without the buffer of other humans or my royal attendants. But I merely inclined my head. "Of course not, Captain." As we walked through the grand crystal spires of the capital, I found myself telling him things I had never shared with any off-worlder. The history of the ancient buildings, yes, but also personal stories, how I had climbed the sacred spire as a hatchling, terrifying my royal caretakers. The time I had hidden from my combat instructors in the Palace of Echoes, only to be betrayed by my own sneeze amplified 100-fold. He laughed at that, a warm rumbling sound that made my scales tingle. "I did something similar as a kid," he shared. "Hid in an air duct at school to skip an exam. Would have worked too if I hadn't fallen asleep and started snoring." I found myself charmed by the parallel. "What punishment did you receive?" "Double homework and a lecture from my mother that made me wish for something more straightforward, like execution. I laughed, actually laughed in public with a lesser species. Had any royal ever done such a thing? I didn't care. We stopped for refreshment at the Emperor's Gardens, a privilege usually reserved for nobility. The serving drones brought us traditional Zaltharian fermented nectar for me and a synthesized approximation of human coffee for him. The garden's massive carnivorous blooms hung above us, their petals lazily tracking the movement of small flying creatures. "Your planet is beautiful," he said, sipping his drink cautiously. "Terrifying in some ways but beautiful." Terrifying? I raised an eyebrow ridge. This coming from a species that evolved on a world with, what were they called? Hurricanes? Tsunamis? Fair point, he conceded. But we don't have flowers that could eat us. Only because your plants lack ambition, I retorted, and was rewarded with another laugh. As the conversation flowed, I found myself relaxing in a way I rarely did. There was something disarming about him, about humans in general, perhaps. They lacked the political calculation that infused every interaction among my kind. "May I ask you something personal, Princess?" he ventured after a comfortable silence. My guard instantly raised. "You may ask. I may not answer." "Fair enough." He leaned forward slightly. "Why did the Emperor really invite us here? Your civilization could have simply taken what you wanted from us. From what I understand of your history, that would have been the expected approach." The question was dangerously direct. Diplomatic protocol suggested I should deflect or offer platitudes about peaceful cooperation. Instead, I found myself giving him truth. "My father is curious about your species. You're unpredictable. Most races we encounter either submit immediately or challenge us foolishly and are conquered. You did neither. You reached out as equals despite your technological disadvantage." "And you?" he asked. "What do you think should be done with us presumptuous humans?" I studied him, noting the intelligence in his eyes, the subtle tension in his posture that belied his casual tone. He was testing me, this primitive being from a backwater world. "I haven't decided yet," I answered honestly. "You're either the most arrogant species we've encountered or the most intriguing." "Maybe both," he suggested with that smile that made my moisture glands act up again. Before I could respond, my communication band chimed. An urgent message from the palace. I excused myself and stepped away to check it. The message was from Imperial Intelligence. Background checks on the human delegation had revealed something concerning. Captain Alexander Chen wasn't just a diplomatic envoy, he was one of Earth's top military strategists, a specialist in asymmetric warfare against technologically superior forces. He had been specifically chosen for this mission not for his diplomatic skills, but for his ability to assess our weaknesses. I looked back at him, sitting calmly in the garden, admiring a particularly vicious thornflower as if it were a harmless decoration. Had it all been an act? The easy conversation, the personal stories, the apparent attraction. A cold realization washed over me. Perhaps I wasn't the only one experiencing unexpected reactions to an alien species. Perhaps Captain Chen had recognized my response to him and was deliberately exploiting it, using my bizarre attraction to secure an advantage for humanity. I returned to the table, my royal mask firmly back in place. "I'm afraid our tour must be cut short, Captain. Urgent matters require my attention." He stood immediately, concern evident on his expressive face. "Nothing serious, I hope?" "Just routine Imperial business," I lied smoothly. "A guide will return you to your quarters." As he was led away, he glanced back once, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. Threat or attraction, I could no longer tell the difference. And that, I realized, made him the most dangerous being I had ever encountered. 3 days passed without my seeking out Captain Chen. I threw myself into military reports, trade negotiations, and the 1,000 mundane duties of a crown princess, but my mind continually drifted back to him. Was he a threat? A strategist sent to find our weaknesses? Or was I overinterpreting things, letting paranoia cloud my judgment? Father had always warned that true warriors trust their instincts. But which instinct should I trust? The one telling me to be wary, or the one drawing me to him like a moon caught in a planet's gravity? On the 4th day, the Imperial Council convened to discuss the human delegation. I sat rigid at my father's right hand, surrounded by the most powerful military and political leaders of our 17 systems. "They are primitives," General Dvex sneered, his old battle scars rippling as he spoke. "Their technological development is barely past the infant stage. I see no strategic value in an alliance." "Their resource worlds are plentiful and largely untapped," countered Trade Minister Scholl. "We could extract significant value with minimal investment." The debate continued, cold and calculating. To my people, humans were merely assets to be evaluated, threats to be measured, or obstacles to be removed. None of them saw what I had glimpsed, the adaptability, the unpredictability, the strange emotional intelligence that might make humans more than they appeared. Princess Zira, my father's voice cut through my thoughts. You've spent time with their leader. Your assessment. All eyes turned to me. I straightened, choosing my words carefully. The humans are more complex than initial reports suggest. They lack our technological advancement but compensate with remarkable adaptability. Captain Chin in particular shows tactical thinking that would be impressive even by Zaltharian standards. I paused, aware of how my next words might be interpreted. I believe underestimating them would be a grave error. My father's head tilted slightly, a gesture I recognized as interest. You recommend caution then? I recommend further study before any definitive action. They may prove more valuable as allies than subjects. A murmur ran through the council. I had just advocated for something unprecedented, treating a less advanced species as potential equals. After the council adjourned, my father kept me behind. We stood on the vast balcony overlooking the capital, twin moons rising on the horizon. You've developed an unusual interest in these humans, he said, his tone deceptively casual. I'm doing my duty, evaluating potential allies or threats. He turned his ancient eyes on me, the same color as mine but weathered by millennia of rule. Is that all it is, daughter? Duty? Heat flushed my scales. What else would it be? I was not always emperor, he said unexpectedly. Before the throne, before your mother, I traveled to many worlds. I've seen many species. Sometimes the universe presents us with unexpected attractions. I nearly choked. Father. The water secretions when you first saw the human captain. I recognized the signs. His voice held no judgment, only a strange gentleness I rarely heard. Our biology is not always aligned with our imperial duties. I have it under control, I said stiffly. Do you? He gazed out at the city. Because I've received reports that the human has been asking about you. Specifically. Persistently. My heart skipped simultaneously. What? He's been researching our customs, our biology, our royal succession. My father's expression hardened. Intelligence believes he's gathering data for military purposes. I've authorized limited surveillance. You're spying on our guests? I was shocked, though I shouldn't have been. This was standard imperial procedure. Of course. He turned to me fully now. And tonight you will join him for the lunar banquet. Sit beside him. Learn what he truly wants from us, from you. You're using me as bait? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. I'm using all resources at my disposal to protect our empire. His tone softened marginally. Including my daughter who, despite her unusual reactions, is still the finest tactical mind in the royal lineage. I recognized the compliment for what it was, both praise and command. I would do as ordered. That evening, I dressed with unusual care in ceremonial armor that emphasized both my royal status and the powerful musculature beneath. The lunar banquet was traditionally a time when warriors displayed their physical prowess to potential mates. The irony wasn't lost on me as servants applied oils to make my scales gleam under the sacred lights. When I entered the great hall, conversations stuttered to silence. I rarely attended such social functions, preferring the training grounds or tactical rooms. Captain Chin stood with his delegation, now expanded to include several other humans who had arrived on a second shuttle. His eyes found mine immediately, widening slightly as I approached. Captain, I greeted him with formal correctness. I trust you find our hospitality adequate? More than adequate, Your Highness. His gaze traveled over my ceremonial attire with what I now recognized as appreciation. Though I admit to some confusion about tonight's event. We were told it's some kind of fighting festival? The lunar banquet celebrates our warrior heritage, I explained, guiding him toward the high table where we would be seated together, by my father's arrangement. There will be ritual combat demonstrations, followed by feasting. It's considered an honor to be invited. And slightly terrifying, he added with a smile that seemed genuine. Your aide mentioned something about challenge rights? I hesitated. It's an ancient custom. Attendees may issue challenges of martial skill. It rarely happens in modern times. What I didn't tell him was that foreign dignitaries were traditionally exempt, but my father had suspiciously canceled that exemption for tonight's event. We took our seats as the banquet began. Traditional fighting forms were demonstrated in the center of the hall, Blade dances, claw techniques, the ancient grappling styles of my people. I found myself watching Chin instead of the performances, noting how he studied each move with the careful eye of someone cataloging weaknesses. So, intelligence was right. He was assessing us militarily. Impressive, he said during a brief pause between demonstrations. Your species has clearly evolved for combat. We evolved to survive, I corrected. Combat was merely the most efficient means. And what about now? His question was quiet, meant only for me. Is combat still the only way forward for the Zaltharian Empire? The question struck deeper than he could know. For centuries I had privately questioned our endless expansionism. What was the point of conquering the galaxy if we had nothing new to discover, no challenges worthy of our skills? Before I could answer, a commotion erupted at the far end of the hall. General Dvex, his scales flushed with fermented nectar, was approaching our table with the unmistakable stride of someone about to make a terrible decision. Princess, he announced, voice carrying through the suddenly silent hall. I invoke challenge rights. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Challenging royalty was technically permitted but almost unheard of. I decline, I said coolly. This is neither the time nor place, General. His eyes shifted to Captain Chin. Then I challenge the human. To test the mettle of these creatures you find so fascinating. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Dvex had clearly seen my interest in Chin and was moving to eliminate it, either by humiliating the human or worse. My father, from his raised dais, made no move to intervene. This was his test, I realized. For both of us. General, I began, the captain is not familiar with our combat protocols. I accept, Chin interrupted, standing. His face betrayed no fear, only a focus I had previously glimpsed when he spoke of tactical matters. My hearts froze. Dvex was our finest warrior after me, a veteran of countless battles. Chin was going to die and it would be my fault. I had allowed my interest in him to become obvious enough that it created this deadly political scenario. The challenge will proceed, my father announced from his throne. To first blood only. A small mercy at least. Though against Dvex, even that might prove fatal. As attendants cleared the central area and Dvex began his preparatory stretches, Chen leaned close to me. I don't suppose you have any last-minute advice for fighting a Zaltharian general? He asked, his attempt at humor undermined by the tightness around his eyes. Don't do this, I hissed. Withdraw. Claim diplomatic immunity. And lose all respect in front of your people? He shook his head. Your intelligence reports on me were thorough, Princess. You know I've studied your combat forms. I've prepared for this possibility. He had known. Somehow he had anticipated this very scenario. As he stepped away to prepare, removing his formal jacket, I glimpsed something unexpected. A series of scars across his back, old wounds that spoke of previous battles. Perhaps he wasn't as defenseless as I had assumed. Dvex entered the combat circle, 7 feet of honed Zaltharian warrior, claws extended. Chin stepped in opposite him, looking impossibly fragile in comparison. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my own claws left indentations in the ancient wood. The combat gong sounded, and Dvex charged with a roar that shook the ceremonial banners hanging from the ceiling. What happened next would change everything. For me, for Chin, and possibly for the relationship between our species forever. Dvex lunged with terrifying speed, claws extended to rip through human flesh like tissue paper. Time seemed to slow as I watched, unable to intervene without violating sacred challenge laws. Chin should have died in that moment. Any rational assessment of the physical disparities between our species made that outcome inevitable. Instead, the human moved with unexpected grace, pivoting just enough that Dvex's claws sliced air where flesh had been a heartbeat before. The general's momentum carried him forward while Chin sidestepped, almost casually, like a dancer rather than a warrior. Murmurs rippled through the gathered Zaltharians. This was not the easy slaughter they had anticipated. Dvex recovered quickly, his warrior instincts compensating for the surprise. He circled more cautiously now, eyes narrowed, assessing. Lucky dodge, human, he growled. The next won't be. Chin didn't respond verbally, just maintained his balanced stance, hands loose at his sides, watching. I recognized the form suddenly. It wasn't random movement but a fighting style I'd never seen before, designed for a smaller opponent against a larger one. The general attacked again, this time with a controlled barrage of strikes designed to corner his opponent. Chin parried the first blow, dodged the second, but the third caught him across the shoulder, tearing his thin clothing and drawing a line of crimson. First blood. The match was technically over. But Dvex didn't stop. Breaking the most sacred rule of challenge combat, he pressed his advantage, clearly intending to maim or kill. The crowd's murmuring turned to shouts of protest. Even among warriors, such a breach was unconscionable. My father half rose from his throne, but tradition prevented even the emperor from interfering once combat had begun. I tensed, preparing to intervene despite the cost, when Qin did something that silenced the entire hall. He spoke a single phrase in ancient High Zaltharian, a language dead for millennia, known only to the royal lineage and the highest religious orders. Kvash Tol Mektar, he said clearly, the pronunciation perfect despite the impossibility of a human tongue forming those sounds. I claim ancestral defense. Dvex froze mid-strike, confusion evident. Every Zaltharian in the room stared in shock. Those precise words hadn't been spoken in living memory, they were from our most sacred texts, invoking a warrior's right to reveal hidden weapons when faced with dishonorable combat. But the true shock came next. Qin reached into his boot and withdrew a small crystal device, pressing it once. The air around him shimmered and suddenly his appearance changed. His body elongated slightly, his skin taking on a faint bluish tint, his eyes shifting to a more almond shape. He wasn't fully human. He was hybrid. Abomination. Dvex roared, recovering from his shock and lunging forward. Qin, or whatever he was, met the charge head-on this time. Moving with impossible speed that matched the general's, he deflected the clawed strike and countered with a precise blow to Dvex's primary nerve cluster, a vulnerable point known only to those intimately familiar with Zaltharian physiology. Dvex collapsed, temporarily paralyzed but very much alive. The hybrid stood over him, breathing heavily, blood still dripping from the shoulder wound. His eyes found mine across the stunned silence of the great hall. "I believe I'm owed an explanation," my father said, his voice dangerously quiet as he descended from the royal dais. The hybrid bowed deeply. "Emperor Calix, I am Terran Qin of Earth Colony Proxima B, son of Ambassador Li Chen and—" He hesitated fractionally. "Science Director Miraklai of House Zorash." Gasps echoed through the hall. House Zorash was an ancient noble line believed extinct for over a century. More importantly, Miraklai had been my father's niece, making this hybrid my second cousin. My father's expression became unreadable, even to me who knew him best. "You claim royal Zaltharian blood." "I don't just claim it, Emperor. I am the result of the secret diplomatic mission to Earth 90 Earth years ago, what your people called the Lost Embassy. We were not destroyed as official records state. We made contact. Some of us chose to stay." I stepped forward, unable to contain myself. "Impossible. Zaltharians and humans cannot produce offspring. Our genetic structures are incompatible." Qin, Terran, turned to me. "Not naturally, no. I am the product of extensive genetic engineering, Princess. The first successful hybrid of our species, designed to serve as a bridge between our worlds." "A bridge?" My father's voice held tightly controlled fury. "You infiltrated our empire under false pretenses, concealed your true nature and now speak of bridges?" "I came to prevent a war," Terran replied firmly. "Earth's long-range sensors detected your military buildup at the edge of our sector. We knew first contact was inevitable, but official channels would lead to either conquest or conflict. I was sent to demonstrate that cooperation is possible, even biological integration." The implications were staggering. Not only had humans known about us far longer than we thought, they had been harboring Zaltharian expatriates, conducting genetic experiments combining our species, and monitoring our military movements. They were far more advanced than we had been led to believe. My father signaled his royal guards. "Secure the human delegation. All of them." "Father," I began, but his glare silenced me. "Not now, Zira." He turned back to Terran. "You and your delegation will be detained while we verify these claims. If you have deceived us about your heritage, the consequences will be severe." As guards surrounded Terran and the other shocked human delegates, alarm bells began blaring throughout the palace. A security officer rushed in, eyes wide with urgency. "Emperor, our long-range sensors have detected multiple vessels entering the system. They've bypassed our outer defenses somehow." My father's head snapped toward Terran. "Is this your doing? A coordinated attack?" "No." Terran looked genuinely alarmed. "Our mission is diplomatic. These ships aren't ours." I moved to the tactical display that activated at the center of the hall, studying the incoming signatures. My blood ran cold. They're Krivlock's warships. At least 12 heavy cruisers. The Krivlocks, the only species that had ever seriously threatened the Zaltharian Empire. We had fought them to a stalemate 2 centuries ago, establishing an uneasy truce. Their appearance now, during this diplomatic crisis, couldn't be coincidence. How did they penetrate our defense grid without detection? My father demanded. One of our commanders examined the data. Unknown Emperor. They're already past the outer moons. Terran spoke up despite his captivity. The Krivlocks have been raiding Earth colonies for the past decade. We thought they were random attacks, but now I understand, they've been studying both our technologies, looking for weaknesses. I saw the strategic implications immediately. They've been waiting for this moment, when our attention was divided by the human delegation. They've been monitoring our communications, studying our reactions. If they attack now with our fleet dispersed, one of the admirals began. We stand on the precipice of a 3-way interstellar war, I finished grimly. My father made a swift decision. Release the hybrid. We'll deal with his deception later. He turned to me. Zira, you've studied Krivlock's tactics more thoroughly than anyone. Take command of our home defense fleet. Emperor, Terran said urgently. The human ships in orbit are few, but they have technology you haven't seen, stealth capabilities that even the Krivlocks can't detect. Let me contact them. We can coordinate a defense. My father hesitated, centuries of imperial isolation warring with immediate tactical necessity. Father, I said quietly, whatever his deception, we face a common enemy. And I believe he speaks the truth about his heritage. I didn't add that my certainty came partly from the undeniable biological response I still experienced in his presence. A reaction that made more sense if he carried Zaltharian genetic markers. As the tactical display showed Krivlock ships moving into attack formation, my father made his decision. Very well. A temporary alliance until the Krivlock's threat is neutralized. He fixed Terran with a steely gaze. But make no mistake, once this is over, you will answer for every deception. Terran nodded solemnly. Understood, Emperor. As we rushed to the command center, Terran fell into step beside me. I wanted to tell you the truth, he said quietly. About what I am. I just needed to be sure I could trust you first. You judged poorly, I replied coldly. And yet now our survival depends on trusting each other despite that. He caught my arm, making me face him in the empty corridor. There's something else you should know. The biological reaction you experience around me is not random. Our genetic engineers specifically designed hybrid pheromones to create a diplomatic advantage with Zaltharian leadership. I jerked away, fury and humiliation burning through me. So my attraction was manufactured? A biological weapon. His expression softened unexpectedly. That was the intention. What they didn't anticipate was that it would work both ways. He held my gaze. I never expected to be drawn to you beyond the mission parameters, Princess. But I am. Quite desperately. Before I could process this revelation, the palace shook with the first impacts of Krivlock's bombardment. The war had begun, and with it, a new chapter in the complex dance between our species. The Imperial Command Center erupted with frantic activity as tactical displays showed the Krivlock ships deploying in a classic pincer formation. Officers shouted orders while damage reports flooded in from the outer defensive platforms. Through the chaos, my father stood unnaturally still at the center, his ancient eyes calculating probabilities with the cold precision that had preserved our empire for millennia. Their formation suggests they plan to target our atmospheric generators, I said, studying the tactical display. If those fail, the capital becomes vulnerable to vacuum exposure. Terran examined the data, his hybrid features now fully visible after deactivating his appearance modifier. Their technology has advanced since your last encounter. These energy signatures suggest quantum shielding, your standard weaponry won't penetrate. And I suppose humans have an answer? Admiral Vextar sneered, still distrustful despite the immediate threat. Not alone, Terran replied evenly. But together, possibly. He turned to me. Princess, your bioresonance cannons, they operate on a frequency that could disrupt quantum fields if modulated correctly. I saw where his thoughts led. But we'd need to get close enough to deploy them effectively. The Krivlocks would destroy any warship before it reached optimal range. Not if they can't see it coming, Terran said, his eyes meeting mine with that same intensity that had first unsettled me days ago. Human stealth technology with Zaltharian firepower. My father intervened. What exactly are you proposing, hybrid? A joint strike team. My ship has prototype stealth capabilities beyond anything you've seen. It can carry a small complement of Zaltharian warriors and one of your portable bioresonance emitters. We penetrate their formation, disable their flagship's shields, and create an opening for your fleet. A classic infiltration strategy, one that appealed to my tactical instincts but seemed suicidal given the circumstances. And who would lead this team? My father asked, though I suspected he already knew the answer. I will, I said before Terran could respond. I know Krivlok's ship layouts better than anyone, and I've studied their commander's tactics. And I'll pilot, Terran added. No one else can operate my ship's systems. My father's expression darkened. You ask me to risk my heir and the future of our empire on an untested alliance with a species that has already deceived us? The command center shook as another barrage struck the palace shields. Warning indicators flashed across the main display. Our defenses were weakening faster than anticipated. We don't have time for debate, I urged. Their next strike will breach the inner perimeter. After a moment that stretched like eternity, my father nodded once. Proceed. But, he fixed Terran with a stare that had broken hardened warriors, if any harm comes to my daughter through your actions or inactions, not even your hybrid nature will spare you from the slowest death our empire has devised. Terran met his gaze without flinching. Understood, Emperor. We moved quickly after that. Terran's ship was unlike anything I'd seen. Smaller than our standard vessels but constructed with technology that seemed to blur the line between organic and mechanical. A small team of my elite guards loaded a portable bioresonance emitter while Terran prepped the launch sequence. As we prepared to depart, Dvex approached, his posture formal despite the lingering effects of the nerve strike. Princess, he said, surprising me by offering the warrior's salute. I request permission to join your strike team. I studied him, searching for any sign of treachery. Why? Because I was wrong, he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. The hybrid defeated me honorably despite my dishonorable continuation. I owe a blood debt. In our culture, such a debt was sacred. I nodded. Permission granted. But you follow my orders without question. As our small team boarded Terran's vessel, he pulled me aside in the cramped corridor leading to the bridge. There's something I haven't told you, he said quietly, ensuring we wouldn't be overheard. The Krivlok's attack isn't random. They're after me, or more specifically what I represent. Explain, I demanded. The genetic technology that created me would give them the ability to adapt to any species, to create infiltrators that could penetrate any civilization. They've been hunting hybrid programs across the galaxy. Another deception. I should have been furious, but there was no time for anger. Then we're using you as bait. He nodded grimly. It's the only way to draw their flagship into position. The plan crystallized in my mind. You've been planning this from the beginning? The diplomatic mission, the revelation of your nature, it was all to create this moment. Not exactly, he said, something vulnerable flickering across his features. The mission was genuine. But I knew the Krivloks would follow eventually. I just didn't expect them so soon. Or that you'd develop real feelings for a Zaltharian princess? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. His expression softened. That was the most unexpected development of all. Before I could respond, the ship's systems hummed to life around us. We had no more time for personal matters. The battle unfolded with terrifying speed. Terran's vessel slipped past the Krivlok's formations like a ghost, its stealth technology proving even more effective than promised. I watched in fascination as he piloted with a precision that merged human intuition with Zaltharian reflexes. His hybrid nature creating something greater than either species alone. Approaching the flagship, he announced as a massive Krivlok's dreadnought filled our view screen. Their scanning systems are still blind to us. Position us beneath their primary shield generator, I ordered, checking the bioresonance emitter's charge. Dvex, prepare the boarding party. The tension on the small bridge was palpable as we maneuvered into position. One mistake, one miscalculation, and we would be vaporized instantly. In position, Terran confirmed. Emitter ready on your command. I took a breath, steeling myself. Activate. The ship vibrated as the bioresonance wave pulsed outward, invisible but devastating to the quantum shielding. The Krivlok's dreadnought's shields flickered, creating a momentary vulnerability. Now, I commanded, and our boarding team launched, myself included. We crossed the vacuum gap between vessels and specialized assault armor, magnetic grapples securing us to the Krivlok's hull. What followed was a blur of combat. My elite guards and I cut through the Krivlok's defenders with practiced efficiency, driving toward the command center. Dvex fought at my side with berserker intensity, his blood debt fueling each strike. Terran moved with us, his hybrid physiology allowing him to keep pace with even our enhanced warriors. We breached the command center to find Supreme Commander Krivlax himself waiting, surrounded by his elite guard. The Zaltharian princess, he rasped through translator implants. And the abomination. How convenient. Surrender your vessel, I demanded, though I knew he wouldn't. The Krivlax commander laughed, a sound like shattering glass. Your empires are already doomed. The humans with their arrogance, the Zaltharians with their pride, neither saw what was coming. And what exactly is coming? Terran asked, stepping forward. Evolution, Krivlax replied. True evolution. Not your pitiful attempts at genetic manipulation. He activated a holographic display revealing a horrifying truth. Dozens of Krivlax fleets, far larger than we'd imagined, positioned throughout the galaxy. Terran and I exchanged glances. This wasn't just an attack, it was the beginning of an invasion. Now! I shouted, and Vex activated the secondary bioresonance emitter we'd concealed, a pulse targeted specifically at Krivlax's neural systems. The commander and his guards collapsed, temporarily paralyzed. Terran rushed to the main control interface, his fingers dancing across alien controls with surprising familiarity. I'm transmitting their fleet positions to both our empires and overriding their command protocols. How do you know Krivlax systems? I demanded, suddenly suspicious again. Because, Terran said, his voice tight with concentration, I'm not just human and Zaltharian. Understanding dawned with horrifying clarity. You have Krivlax DNA as well. He nodded grimly. 3 species. The ultimate infiltrator, but created by Earth scientists to end this war before it began, not to serve the Krivlax agenda. As Terran completed the transmission, alarms blared throughout the dreadnought. Self-destruct sequence initiated, an automated voice announced. Time to leave, Terran said, grabbing my arm. We fought our way back to the extraction point, losing 3 warriors to Krivlax reinforcements. As we prepared to cross back to Terran's vessel, Vex was struck by enemy fire, his armor breached. I moved to help him, but he waved me off. Go, princess. My blood debt is paid. He activated his remaining weapons, turning to face the oncoming Krivlax. For the Empire. We barely escaped before the dreadnought exploded, the blast momentarily blinding the viewscreen. The shockwave sent our small vessel tumbling, systems flickering. Did the transmission get through? I asked, checking the damage reports. Terran nodded, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. Both Earth and Zaldar received the data. The Krivlax have lost their element of surprise, and their flagship. As we limped back toward the Imperial Palace, I studied him in the dim emergency lighting. Triple hybrid. You're the only one of your kind in the galaxy. Yes, he admitted. A prototype deemed too dangerous to replicate. After me, the program was shut down. And now? Now both our species know the true threat. The question is whether they'll work together to face it. The Imperial fleet had rallied in our absence, driving back the remaining Krivlax vessels. As we docked at the palace, my father was waiting, his expression inscrutable. The Krivlax fleet is retreating, he announced. Thanks to your actions. His gaze shifted to Terran. And the data you transmitted has been verified. It seems we face a common enemy greater than we imagined. An enemy that requires a united response, I suggested, standing tall despite my injuries. My father studied me for a long moment, then looked at Terran. The human delegation has proposed an alliance, military coordination, technological exchange, and... He paused significantly, diplomatic integration. Diplomatic integration? I repeated, wondering what that could possibly mean. My father's expression softened imperceptibly. They have suggested that a formal union between our species would symbolize our commitment. A royal marriage. I froze, understanding washing over me. You want me to marry him? A triple hybrid spy who deceived us from the beginning? A warrior who helped save our homeworld, my father corrected. And perhaps the only being in the galaxy who can truly understand both our worlds. Terran looked as shocked as I felt. Emperor, I didn't. This wasn't my intention when... Wasn't it? I challenged, my emotions churning. The pheromones, the genetic compatibility, it was all engineered for this outcome. The biology was engineered, Terran admitted. The feelings weren't. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Zira, I would never agree to this unless you wanted it. Politics and biology aside, what happened between us was real, at least for me. I searched his eyes, those strange eyes that now revealed hints of all 3 species within them. Despite everything, my traitorous body still responded to his proximity, my scales flushing with color. But now I understood it wasn't just biology. It was something more, something neither human science nor Zaltharian tradition could fully explain. I need time, I told my father. We all do. To prepare for the Krivlocks, to consider this alliance too. I glanced at Terran, to determine what's real and what's engineered. My father nodded. Time you shall have, daughter. But not too much. The galaxy is changing around us, and for the first time in millennia, the Zaltharian Empire must change with it. As the medical teams attended to our injuries and strategic planners began coordinating with Earth forces, Terran found me on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. I never meant to make you question your own feelings, he said quietly. I didn't look at him. How could I not? Everything I felt was manipulated from the start. Was it? He stood beside me, careful not to touch me. The pheromones opened a door, perhaps. But what came after, the conversations, the understanding, the respect, that can't be manufactured. Finally, I turned to him. Then deactivate it. Whatever genetic modification creates this response in me, turn it off. If what's between us is real, it will remain without the biological imperative. Terran hesitated, then reached for the small device at his wrist. As you wish, princess. With a simple command, the device hummed softly. It's done, he said. No more pheromone enhancement. I waited, expecting the rush of attraction to fade, the moisture on my scales to dry, my hearts to slow their synchronized beating. Nothing changed. I stared at Terran in confusion, my heart still racing, scales still flushed with moisture. It didn't work. A smile slowly spread across his face, that infuriating, captivating human expression I'd come to anticipate. Or perhaps it worked perfectly. Explain, I demanded, though some part of me already understood. The pheromones create initial attraction, yes. They're designed to bypass prejudice, to get two different species to notice each other, he said carefully. But they can't create genuine connection. They can't maintain attraction once the initial response fades. So what I'm feeling now is real, Zira. As real as mine for you. I turned away, staring out at the stars, processing this revelation. If my attraction to him wasn't manufactured, then what did that mean for everything else? For the proposed alliance? For us. We have more pressing matters than personal feelings, I said finally, falling back on royal training. The Krivlocks will regroup. They'll attack again. They will, Terran agreed, accepting my deflection. But next time they'll face united resistance. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The human delegation expanded as more of their ships arrived, bringing scientists, military strategists, and diplomats. My father, ever the pragmatist, recognized the value of human ingenuity combined with Zaltharian strength. Technology was exchanged, battle plans formulated, defensive perimeters established. Through it all, Terran and I worked closely together, our unique perspectives bridging the gaps between our species. I observed how the human delegates looked to him with a mixture of awe and wariness, not unlike how my own people regarded me. We were both caught between worlds, belonging fully to neither. 2 weeks after the Krivlocks' attack, I found Terran in the memorial garden, standing before the newly erected monument to those who had fallen in the battle, including Dvex. He died with honor, I said, approaching quietly. Terran nodded. He did. Even after I humiliated him in combat. He understood in the end. That true strength comes in many forms. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the garden's bioluminescent plants casting soft light across the memorial stones. The Royal Council has been debating the marriage proposal, I said finally. Some are strongly in favor. Others consider it sacrilege. And what does Princess Zira think? Terran asked, turning to face me. I met his gaze directly. Princess Zira thinks political marriages are an antiquated concept. His face fell slightly. But, I continued, Zira of House Kalaran, the warrior who fought beside you, thinks there might be value in exploring what exists between us, politics aside. The hope that flickered across his features was endearingly transparent. For all his hybrid nature, his human emotional expressiveness remained. I'd like that, he said simply. 3 cycles later, the Imperial Palace hosted an unprecedented event, a formal integration ceremony, marking the official alliance between Earth and the Zaltharian Empire. Not a royal wedding as initially proposed, but something new, something that honored both traditions without forcing either to compromise their core values. I stood beside my father on the ceremonial platform, watching as human and Zaltharian representatives exchanged symbolic tokens. The great hall was filled with members of both species, the tension of those first meetings now replaced with cautious optimism. You've changed our course, my father said quietly for my ears alone. Centuries of isolation ended in less than a month. For the better? I asked, genuinely curious about his assessment. He considered this. Time will tell. But adaptation has always been the true strength of our people, even when we forgot it. His acknowledgement meant more than he could know. As the ceremony concluded, Terran approached, dressed in a unique uniform that combined elements of both cultures, a physical representation of the bridge he embodied. The Krivloks have been spotted near the Sigma Quadrant, he reported. A scouting force testing our combined defenses. Then we should greet them properly, I replied. My father nodded his approval. Take the new hybrid vessel. Show them what our alliance can accomplish. The hybrid vessel, named Unity in human tradition and Kvash Terran in ours, meaning joined strengths, represented the best of both worlds. Zaltharian weaponry and defenses combined with human stealth technology and adaptive systems. Terran and I had been instrumental in its design, drawing from our unique perspectives. As we prepared for departure, I found myself in my private chambers, completing the pre-battle meditation ritual that had centered me before countless conflicts. Terran respectfully waited at the threshold, understanding the importance of this tradition. The crew is ready, he said when I had finished. Both human and Zaltharian components report optimal readiness. I rose, adjusting my battle armor. You're not concerned about facing the species that comprises part of your genetic makeup? He considered this. I contain elements of all three species, but I choose which aspects to embrace. His expression hardened slightly. The Krivloks seek domination through assimilation. That's not a path I would ever choose. As we walked toward the launch bay, he added, besides, I've found there are more satisfying ways for different species to come together. I felt my scales flush slightly at his implication. Focus on the mission, Captain. His smile returned. Always, Princess. The Unity performed brilliantly in its first engagement, routing the Krivlok scouting force without casualties. As word spread throughout both empires, more worlds sought to join our alliance, recognizing the threat the Krivloks posed to all independent species. 6 months after our first meeting in the throne room, Terran and I stood once more on the observation deck where we had shared so many pivotal moments. The view had changed. Now a combined fleet of human and Zaltharian vessels patrolled the space around our homeworld, a visible symbol of our new reality. Intelligence reports suggest the Krivloks are reconsidering their invasion plans, Terran said. Our alliance has given them pause. For now, I cautioned. They'll adapt. Find new weaknesses. And we'll be ready when they do. He hesitated, then added, together. The word hung between us, loaded with meaning beyond military alliance. In the months we'd worked side by side, our connection had deepened beyond anything I could have imagined that first day. I had come to value his perspective, his strange blend of human intuition and Zaltharian tactical thinking. And yes, my body still responded to his proximity, moisture beating along my scales whenever he stood close. I've been offered a permanent position as liaison between Earth and Zaldar, he said, breaking the comfortable silence. It would mean staying here in the capital. And is that what you want? I asked. Partly. He turned to face me fully. But there's more. The scientists have been studying my hybrid physiology, looking for ways to expand what I represent. Not through genetic manipulation this time, but through understanding. I frowned. What do you mean? They believe that over time, with proper medical support, natural reproduction between our species might be possible. Not easily, but possible. His voice softened. Future generations wouldn't need to be created in laboratories. They could be born of genuine connection. The implications were staggering. Not just an alliance of convenience against a common enemy, but a true merging of our civilizations, our peoples, our futures. That's a significant discovery. I managed royal training helping me maintain composure. It is, he agreed. Especially for someone who might one day wish to continue the royal lineage with a partner not of pure Zaltharian blood. I couldn't help but laugh at his directness. Rather presumptuous, don't you think? A half-human, quarter-Zaltharian, quarter-Krivloks hybrid aspiring to the imperial bloodline. Entirely presumptuous, he admitted with a grin. Though I prefer ambitious to presumptuous. The Royal Council would have collective cardiac arrest. All the more reason to consider it. I shook my head but couldn't suppress my own smile. You're impossible. I'm unique in the galaxy, he corrected. As are you, Princess Zira. Perhaps that's why we found each other. As I looked at him, This impossible being who had changed everything in my world, I felt something I'd rarely experienced in 200 cycles of life. Uncertainty about the future and excitement because of it. I'm not agreeing to anything, I warned him. Especially not some arcane human pair bonding ritual. Of course not, he said solemnly, though his eyes sparkled with that infuriating humor. I would never expect the crown princess of the mighty Zaltharian Empire to rush into anything as trivial as personal happiness. I hissed softly at his teasing, but allowed him to take my clawed hand in his strange, five-fingered one. One battle at a time, I told him firmly. First, we ensure the Krivlok's threat is contained. Then we stabilize the alliance. Only then do we discuss personal matters. A sound strategic approach, he agreed. Though I reserve the right to continue making you flush moisture when I look at you. You're fortunate I no longer bite the heads off impertinent males, I informed him. Extremely fortunate, he agreed, raising my hand to his lips in that strange human gesture I had come to anticipate. As I looked out at the stars, the same stars I had gazed upon my entire life, now transformed by new possibilities, I reflected on how completely my world had changed since that first diplomatic meeting. The crown princess who had stood rigid with royal dignity would hardly recognize the warrior who now contemplated a future intertwined with a hybrid being from a species we had nearly dismissed. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. And for the first time in my long life, I was eager to discover the punchline. When Terran's communication device chimed with a priority alert, we both straightened, immediately shifting back to our professional roles. The Krivloks? I asked. He checked the message and shook his head. No. It's from Earth. They're sending a delegation of their finest scientists, specialists in xenobiology and cultural integration. More diplomats, I sighed. Not exactly. His expression was oddly hesitant. It's my parents, both of them. My human father and my Zaltharian mother. I stared at him. Your mother is still alive? A Zaltharian who has lived among humans for nearly a century? He nodded. She's eager to return home even briefly. And more eager to meet you. The thought was terrifying and fascinating in equal measure, to meet a Zaltharian who had chosen to live among humans, who had helped create this impossible being standing before me. Then we should prepare a proper welcome, I said, falling back on royal protocol when emotions became too complex. Terran squeezed my hand gently. They'll love you. Almost as much as I do. The words hung in the air between us, the first time either of us had named this thing growing between our worlds. I didn't return the declaration. Not yet. Some Zaltharian traditions were worth preserving, and in our culture, such admissions came after battle bonding, after proving oneself worthy through shared victory and sacrifice. But as we turned to prepare for this new diplomatic challenge, I allowed my tale to twine briefly with his, an intimacy no other had ever been granted. His smile told me he understood both what I was offering and what I was not, yet. The galaxy was changing. Our peoples were changing. And somehow, impossibly, I was changing too. Not despite my royal heritage and warrior training but because of it. Adaptation, as my father had said, had always been our true strength. Later that evening, as reports came in of another Krivlok sighting at the edge of our system, Terran and I boarded the Unity once more, ready to face whatever came next. The future remained uncertain, filled with challenges no strategic simulation could predict. But for the first time, that uncertainty felt like freedom rather than chaos. Whatever came next, we would face it as neither fully human nor fully Zaltharian, but as something new, something stronger than either could be alone. And if my scales still flushed with moisture when he looked at me a certain way, well, perhaps some biological responses transcended genetic engineering after all.